Well, happy Wednesday to you all. Wednesday, March 30th. It's the Vote Common Good Daily podcast. It's a Tuesday, which means we talk about politics on this very fine day. A lot that happens in our political life. You know, around here, we like to say that you can have an open-eyed view of the world. You want to see everything you can see, but you can also carry a little bit of hope with you as you engage in your civic life, and that includes our politics. So we want people to feel like they're in a community that's forming a common good political ethic. So that's why we talk about politics on Tuesday, and faith on Wednesdays, and science on Fridays, and news on Mondays, and big topics on Thursday. A lot of things going on around here. We're glad to have you. I'm Doug Padgett in Minneapolis, Minnesota, standing up today, and joined on Tuesdays, as always, by Pastor Robb and political organizer for the Vote Common Good effort. Good morning, Robb.
Good morning, Doug. How are you?
You know, I'm hanging in there. As I mentioned, I'm in Minneapolis, and this is the center of national world attention around the trial of Derek Chauvin, who formerly was a Minneapolis police officer and killed George Floyd with his knee. And that trial is happening right now. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch it yesterday. It was heartbreaking and riveting and boring, like pacing of a court trial. And it was a flashback to me all the way back to the O.J. Simpson trial, when, you know, it was when you couldn't record it or watch that online. You had to sit in front of a television and watch it live. And sort of, I was remembering all the machinations that go into a court trial, and just how heavy it can be when you're both in the trial narratives, but then also feeling this very deep pain of, in this case, police killing, and all the times that Black people, especially in this country, are targeted and harmed by those who are called to serve and protect and take a oath to do so. And it's it feels heavy in Minneapolis again. You know, we can feel that whatever that psychic pressure is, whatever, you know, the world's attention, I guess, is the reason people have put the Olympics or want to have a big sporting event in their city. It just sort of peps everything up, you know, that people are talking about. And I have no idea how all these things work in the cosmos, but the same thing can happen when you have a heavy experience, whether it's a natural disaster or a human conflict. You feel it, and I don't know. I feel it around and about. You know, when I talk to people and they say, "Hey, where do you live?" and I say, "Well, I'm in Minneapolis," and then they go, "Oh, how you doing?" You know, you really feel it. So anyway, to all that pressure that people are feeling here in Minneapolis and around the world, we hope that the citizens, the judicial system, the witnesses here in Minneapolis do the right thing.
Yeah, and it's an interesting comparison that you drew between the OJ trial and this one. I think it's an interesting comparison for a couple of reasons. One, because there is so much attention, and I think very few trials get watched. You know, I mean, there's court TV, you know, I don't know, is that still a thing? There's court TV, there's, you know, Judge Judy and all, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, very few trials get to the level of being a part of the national psyche and consciousness that people would sit down during the day and watch it, or you would have it on while you're working. This is one, like the OJ trial, that, you know, has gotten that kind of attention. I personally didn't watch yesterday, but I was kind of blown away by the number of people that I follow on Twitter that were watching and were live tweeting it. And then the other kind of comparison to the OJ trial is that this trial, like that one, sits right on the fault line of white supremacy and racism in America, and race relationships in our country. And so it feels to me like the verdict is going to send shockwaves, probably either way. But I think if this police officer is found not guilty of murder, um, I it wouldn't surprise me to see um, a resurgence of protests around the country in light of that.
Yeah. 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 And there needs to be, right? Like we
Yeah.
need
Oh yeah.
to, it seems to me, we need to respond to this moment with some kind of collective action, right? Regardless
Yeah.
of how it goes. And I was encouraged by some of the people that I heard who were part of the Floyd family effort that went on yesterday outside before the first day of trial started. And they were making a good point that no, even if Chauvin is found guilty of the murder charge or the third degree murder charge, or the manslaughter charge, that doesn't rectify all the situations, right? The
No.
system is still set in such a way, and the predisposition is still set in such a way that many people feel that it is not only not working equally and not working in their favor, but many Black people especially feel that it works intentionally against their better interests. And that makes a really big thing. I noticed yesterday that the Biden announcement about vaccine updates came out,
Yeah.
that they went live with that during the lunch break of the trial.
Hmm.
So people have noticed this, and the White House didn't say, "Oh no, we did that on purpose." Yeah, we want to make sure people keep watching that, or we didn't want to compete with it. But I thought it was. I hope it was intentional on their behalf,
Yeah.
and I thought it was appropriately thoughtful in a political arena, right?
Yeah.
That you would recognize that this is a national narrative that we are experiencing, and that frankly, our political system and our judicial system are not equipped to deal with the ongoing racial struggles, animus, and wrongdoing that continues to happen in this country. Like it's ill-fitting. It can't go far enough, right? It's to solve for it overall. So the best we're going to get is that that people feel it was a fair and honest verdict. And I mean, I'm one of those people who just does not think that a fair and honest verdict could be that Derek Chauvin was responsible for George Floyd's death, and in doing so was well outside the bounds of what a police officer is currently allowed to do to a person that's in their custody. I just think it's I don't know, you know, I'm settled. I would have been dismissed from the jury, right?
Yes.
Had my number come up, and this being my
as the prosecutor said, believe your eyes, believe what you saw. I mean, there's no question. You know, we saw it with our own eyes.
Yep. Yeah. And look, the other thing, and there's some legislation going through brought to us by Democrats that wants to remove this basic functional immunity for police officers when they're performing their professional duties. Right. And that has to happen because right now the system has been negotiated by a lot of police unions to basically create a context in which a police officer will not be held responsible for their own behavior as long as they're a police officer. And this extends to even when you're out of uniform or you're off duty. It's this almost diplomatic immunity level of protection. And that I understand why a union would argue for that. I get all that, but boy, we've got to find another way forward on this. And what I have heard some people say is that every police officer or city should have to carry employee insurance, and that their behavior then is scrutinized by insurance companies that pay this out, because the city of Minneapolis, I think, paid $27 million out of its insurance fund to the Floyd family. And if you put a ability for the behavior of a police officer to be scrutinized by someone other than other police officers, which is what's currently done, it's that might be a place where some advancement could take could move us forward. So
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
I like that idea. So, you mentioned the president making and his team making some announcements about the coronavirus. I got to, while we've all got kind of one eye on Minneapolis and the trial there, feels like the other eye is on the numbers related to the coronavirus. There's as vaccine rates increase, which is wonderful to see, and reason for encouragement and reason for joy. At the same time, case numbers are increasing as well. And that is deeply concerning to me. I think, I was, a week or two ago or 3 weeks ago when I was at the Sam's Club getting my vaccine, I was feeling a lot of optimism about, the direction we were headed. And man, I got to tell you, the last couple of days is that the numbers continue to creep up and up as mask mandates expire, including here in Arkansas, where I am. The mask mandate expires on Wednesday night at midnight. And, people will no longer be required to wear masks. And that happens in, states around the country. You see, Texas and Florida. And, it's deeply concerning that we are taking our foot off the gas when it comes to how seriously we're taking the pandemic. And that's going to lead to, as a longtime Cleveland Browns fan, I have learned the phrase snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, because it happens a lot. Nice. And I've got this nervousness that we are going to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory here with the coronavirus, as people think, well, hey, we're good, and that's going to slow the herd immunity that will come about as a result of the vaccine, and allow for variants to be introduced and passed around, which makes this thing harder to contain. It's deeply troubling. I don't know how you're feeling about all of it, Doug.
Yeah, thanks. I am feeling that similarly. I don't have a vaccine regimen started yet. I guess 80% of the U.S. population doesn't. So even though it's available, we're just statistically and vulnerability wise, we're just not different than we were a month ago. Even though, the possibility is different. It feels a bit like, I keep using this analogy of being on a road trip, and this is like you're now 5 miles from home is no time to take off your seatbelt, right?
Yeah.
That just because we're getting close doesn't mean you're there yet. Close is not the same thing as arrived. And on the other hand, I was looking at statistics last night of where the increases in cases are coming from. And it showed me again that whether it's all on the Trump administration or some can be applied to the Biden administration, we do not have a system by which we test people for the virus and track how they contracted the virus. This has been the great failure in the last year, is that never was a system put together to trace and track. They were talking about that very aggressively a year ago in March, and then stopped talking about it. And we don't talk about it now. And so I started looking up these numbers, like, well, I'm sure in the places where the mask mandate has been lifted, that's where all the numbers are coming from, Florida and elsewhere. Turns out, yes, Florida is up, but so is Minnesota, where we have a very aggressive mask mandate. So is Michigan with a very aggressive mask mandate. So is New Jersey with a very aggressive mask mandate. Arkansas, lowest rate of infection in the last 7 days. Like New Jersey or Florida is like a 42 of 100,000 people. Arkansas, 6. Once again, last in the nation, Arkansas.
Yeah,
this time it's a win, right? It's a good thing. So here's my point: is
that's because so many folks have already had it.
Good point. I guess it should be of those still available to be infected. That could be it. But my point is, wow, like, yes, I do want us to say to one another, hey, we've all got to look around and do what we can to make sure that we don't have a fourth surge. It's a little shocking, though, that we still don't really know what has brought about the second, third, and maybe now the fourth surge.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not so simple. Like, our system of analysis of behavior versus transmission. We are still in March 2020 land when it comes to that. And so to see the CDC director, to hear Biden say what they say, it's the best thing. It's better than saying what Trump said. Absolutely. Yep. It would just be great if we were also developing the infrastructure and apparatus, not only for this virus that's going to continue on for a number of days or for a number of months, maybe a year, but also whatever other viral infections strike this nation, that we have a system by which we can measure these things. And that's a little scary to me, is that fundamentally we're in no better position to test and track and trace. Now, we're in a better position to test, and we're in a better position to mitigate, and a better position to vaccinate. But we're not in a better position to do the most important thing that they said a year ago, which was to test, track, and trace. Yep. So that you can put into place the right behaviors that are going to be effective. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do a blanket masking and all. We absolutely should, because that's the only thing we can do right now. We're working with a very blunt instrument. It would be nice if we would take as seriously going forward the need to create a response system that's more useful. Yeah. And I hope the Biden team and NHS and WHO and all the letters get themselves, all the alphabet get themselves together to figure out how we do the very thing that we have to do to make sure that this goes away when it possibly can. Because what we've been doing so far, I mean, we keep getting these surges, right? And it's still not clear. Well, does it come from schools? Does it come from shopping malls? Does it come from homes? And there's a narrative out there which is blaming anybody who gets it, that somehow they did something wrong. Now, that might be the case. We might find out at the end of all of this that individual behavior is what caused it. Or it might be that this virus spreads in ways that, even with the precautions that we're able to take, it's so transmissible, people are going to get it, and we can bend the curve with some very aggressive movement. But we just need to know, frankly, what is it that works?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you see the 60 Minutes, or not 60 Minutes, the CNN Sanjay Gupta hosted conversation with the doctors? Riveting.
I don't watch much news. Yeah.
Oh, well.
Good stuff. Huh?
Pick up a cable subscription and check out CNN, or go to CNN.com and watch this one, because it's interviews with the doctors, right? Dr. Birx and Fauci and the guy who was in charge of the FDA and the guy who was in charge of the CDC, and they all, now that they're not, other than Fauci, now that they're not under government employ, they can say what they want. One of the big takeaways to me from this, and it's very political in this sense. And by the way, to those who are watching right now, we are going to have one of the candidates running for Senate in Wisconsin on here in a few minutes. He's running against Ron Johnson, who is one of the senators that needs to go do something else in his life.
This guy's got to go.
This country. So he's going to be on here in a minute. But watching this CNN story, what you realize all the way up to March, like Fauci describes it, between January and March, the thing that got them is they did not believe that something like COVID could be spread by people that were asymptomatic. This is the big takeaway. Why did they believe that? Because they had never seen it before. They had a knowledge set that told them, if you get this virus, you're going to demonstrate symptoms, including a fever. And maybe you remember way back a year ago, that was the number one thing. That's why everybody had, detectors for measuring, your temperature. Very sophisticated and very simple ones. They were being told by the Chinese, and this is from the doctors themselves and Fauci and others, they were being told by the Chinese government, this is spreading asymptomatically in China. And our government said, no, that's not how it works. It can't spread asymptomatically because we have a knowledge set that tells us that's never happened before. So what they talk about here is that they had to set aside their previous assumptions and use a greater level of imagination to understand the reality of what was going on. And this is what happens over and over in no matter our system. You can go back to September 11th, and the people who worked in counterterrorism said, the reason we didn't imagine what they were going to do is because we had a protocol that we thought terrorists followed. We knew what they would do if they hijacked a plane or if they were going to do a terrorist attack. We never imagined this. And the big takeaway was that the counterterrorism movement suffered from a lack of imagination. We used to make a big deal about this back 20 years ago when I was doing a lot of church work and consulting and having faith leaders think about a deeper level of imagination, that they lack the imagination to get it. That's what happened with COVID. But they were looking at data and saying that data must be wrong because this is not how it spreads. It's an incredibly powerful narrative problem that we saw with COVID, and I feel like that's continuing on now. Right? We now know some things, and there's this old saying by Mark Twain: "It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble; it's what you know for sure that just ain't so." And that's just a reality in so much of our systems, is that we have to not only scrutinize what we know and use the best data, but we also have to look and say, are there some things that we believe that we know that are actually getting in the way of explaining what's going on now? All of that to say, these surges, I feel like we don't know what's causing them. Now, yes, mask up. Yes, socially distance. Yes, get your vaccine. Absolutely. Everything indicates that those three things help. But we're still getting spread in states where we're doing all of those things. Minnesota, highest level of vaccination per capita. Mask mandates across the board. Social distancing requirements that are as significant as anywhere in the country. Our numbers are going up. So there's something that's not computing. And sometimes people who want to advocate for those three actions don't want to say, even when those actions are put in place, we're still seeing a rise, because it feels then like people are going to say, well, then we don't know. And how can we know? And don't tell people that, because then they won't do it. But that little trouble circle of logic, that's something I think we need to deal with in this country, and we need to deal with it politically, because it just becomes part of our narratives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am far more confident now than I have been in over a year, with the leadership in the White House beginning at the very top. I mean, I just, I think when Joe Biden says, "Hey, I'm going to tell you the truth, and even if it doesn't work, even if it's hard truth, I'm going to tell you the truth," I'm willing at this point to believe him about that, and think that this is a great opportunity for competent and compassionate and empathetic leadership from the very top to make a difference, and hopefully it will.
I'm really glad that Tom Nelson's going to join us. He's running for the Senate seat in Wisconsin, so he's going to jump on here in a minute. And Robb, to your, and Dan, you can go ahead and put him on now if you like. And I think about your comment, Robb, that how much better we all feel with this administration than the previous one. We used to say on the Vote Common Good tour that getting a new president is not going to solve every problem in our
Right.
country. But the president shouldn't be the problem in our country.
That's right.
And removing one of the major problems is a really good thing, so we can get on to the rest of the system solving the other problems. Well, I would have to say nothing feels more akin to that than replacing the current Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. So, Tom Nelson, thank you for joining us. Thank you for running for this Senate seat. And we're so glad that you're running, and so glad that you'll spend a little bit of time with us today. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Great to be on.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I'm sure we're going to spend some time.
Hold on. Before I mean, I love this setup. You know, it's kind of like the angel and the devil, right? On the two shoulders. Am I the first one to bring that up?
You are the first one to bring that up. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'm a pastor's kid, so those are the kinds of things you look for.
Well, this isn't the first time you've seen this angel and devil over your shoulder.
Which one is which? Who's who?
Yeah. I'll just mention for those listening on the podcast, the treat you get when you watch the live stream is that we use these little graphics and circles for our faces. So there's a circle of Robb's face, a circle of my face on either side of Tom's face. So it's a wonderful moment. So thanks for noticing that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Tom, thanks so much for being on with us. I'm sure we're going to talk about Ron Johnson quite a bit because he's been such a lightning rod lately. And it feels to me like it's always a bad thing when you know somebody's name. You know, it's like when you know the name of a ship like that, like the fact that we all know the name Ever Given that's bad news. And I feel like there's kind of that same way with politics usually, that if everybody around the country knows the name of the Wisconsin senator, that's, it's probably not good. We're going to talk about.
With one exception, if you remember back almost 20 years ago, when Senator Russ Feingold, he was the lone Democrat, the lone U.S. senator to oppose the Patriot Act, which was very controversial. Everyone knew about it, but of course, maybe it started out as kind of controversial on the not so good side, but history proved them right. And we're not talking 20 years, 30 years, but just a couple of years down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So before we talk about Ron Johnson and why, you would be a much better senator for the folks of Wisconsin than he, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about your background and what has led you to run for the United States Senate.
Great, thank you. It's good to be on again. So here I am in Outagamie County, so Appleton, which is the county seat, and I'm currently the county executive, a post that I've held for almost 10 years. Not every state has a county executive, so it's a kind of county government where you usually have maybe county commissioners that do the policy. In this case, we have the policy, the county board, and then you have the county executive, which does more of the administration, the execution, kind of like governor versus the state legislature. So Outagamie County is the fifth largest county in the state. We have 72 of them. Population about 180,000. I am blessed. I have the honor to have a 1,300 person workforce. I run everything from an international airport to one of the largest recycling operations publicly owned and operated in the country. Very proud of that. Before that, I served 3 terms in the state legislature, last term as majority leader. I grew up down the road in a little town called Little Chute, which is about 10,000 souls. And my dad moved the family there in 1980. I was 4 years old when he started a Lutheran mission church in nearby Combined Locks, which is the village where I worked to help save a paper mill just a few years ago, which is the subject of a book I came out with earlier this month. So the question that you had about like what brought me to today, or maybe more specifically, what brought me to my first race for the state assembly back in 2004 had a lot to do with my dad and the path that he chose in life. So he found his call in the ministry, serving his neighbors, his friends, people in the community, and I found it in electoral office, where I can get
Mhm.
involved and hopefully make constructive social and economic change that benefit working families, whether it's from the perch of a state legislator or as a county executive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is the
Great.
county
So,
executive role, is that an elected seat that you're in?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And so Wisconsin, some counties have county executives and some have county administrators. So the county administrators is probably more of a typical county governance
Mhm.
setup. And I think there are 10 or 11 county executives, all of which are the 10 or 11
Yeah.
largest counties in the state, representing about maybe 60% of the population.
So back in 2004, you get the bug for going around and saying to people, hey, you should pick me. And that's not easy for everybody. Rob and I have spent a couple of years traveling the country and working with candidates. And there's a certain kind of person who's willing to put themselves out into the public eye and say, you should hire me for this job. You should vote for me. Please be on my side on this thing. You've been doing this for a while. How does that feel to you? How are you doing with, now at a state level and at this kind of high profile level of saying first to your own party, make me the candidate, and then saying to the state, make me your senator? Boy, that's putting yourself out there.
It is. It is. I mean, in some respects, it is similar to how you would run for office as a county executive and as a member of the state assembly. The tools and approaches are a little bit different, especially since it's been 17 years since I ran for my first office for the state assembly. And the ways in which it's same is you basically start from scratch. It's like, running a startup company, which, you have to hustle, you have limited resources, and you just have to kind of grind it out. When I ran for the state assembly, I did the same way my dad was, which go to door to door, be creative in the communications. I remember my dad, he had this cute thing where he put in the classified wanted section. So this is way back, when newspapers had,
Nice.
before monster.com or, those type of, job searching websites. Before that time, he put something, something clever that would try to attract people to go to church, looking for someone who, Sunday morning, something like that. And it's the same thing as county executive. I mean, it's the same thing as for running for the U.S. Senate. So obviously, you can't go door to door for a statewide race, and you certainly can't do it during COVID. So you try creative approaches on social media, through email, and in those cases, especially because you couldn't do any advertising on Facebook or Twitter, you couldn't do any type of ads on Facebook for the first 4.5 months of my campaign. It was organic. It was calling friends. It was, direct messaging this person, emailing this person, kind of things like that. That nature. So I think that there are some similarities. But you're right. I mean, U.S. Senate. That's going to be, it's a pretty big stage. And when you look at all the U.S. Senate races, this is going to be one of the top three.
Yeah.
There isn't a presidential election coming up in a year, so these will be the top three races in the country, and that responsibility is not lost on me.
yeah. Tom, you mentioned the book that you just had come out. It's about a paper mill that you were able to help. You were instrumental in help saving, and I believe that was through coordination with the union that served the workers at that mill. I'm curious. Unions are kind of in the public psyche again right now because of what's happening in Alabama with Amazon and the push to unionize Amazon workers. I'm curious, what your experience has been in that way, what it's taught you that might shed some light on, what's currently happening with, one of the nation's biggest retailers, one of the world's biggest retailers.
Right. I think that there is I think really for the first time in a long time, you have this large swath on age groups, sectors, industries, experiences for workers that are recognizing that there is an institution, so to speak, that there is a way to improve their lot, to raise wages, to improve working standards, which is the case for Amazon. You can hear these stories about how they don't give you any time to go to a bathroom and you have to find alternative ways to do that. I mean, really ridiculous things. And you said, I mean, this is one of the largest companies in the world. You're going to need a union. You're going to need a union to effect constructive change for you and your coworkers. There's just no two ways around it. This is exactly what happened to turn the century with industrial unions. You look at the paper industry, which I cover my history section, my book, where workers had to fight hard for this. Oftentimes, they went up against violence. There were paper mills that hired out their own Pinkertons, and this happened. Andrew Carnegie. So I'm not comparing, Amazon Security to the Pinkertons, but that there have been these type of institutional forces, societal forces that workers went up against in the early 1900s, and we're kind of experiencing the same thing too. And so it's not surprising, taking page out of history, that you are seeing a resurgence in the labor movement. And fortunately, not only is there a groundswell, and that's the best way to do it, it's only going to work out if you have activism in the grassroots, the rank and file, workers on the front lines who really want this. But the labor movement is also fortunate to have up and coming leaders like Sarah Nelson, no relation, who's the international president for the Association of Flight Attendants. And you need to have leaders at all levels, and obviously the workforce in Alabama for Amazon, they have good leaders, just like Stop and Shop did in New England. I think it was 1 or 2 years ago. The West Virginia teachers who inspired the Chicago teachers, the Los Angeles teachers. So it really is catching fire, kind of like a prairie fire, as they would say. I mean, maybe not in the upper Midwest, but our neighbors to the Southwest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, Tom, the Johnson names and Nelson names, very familiar to me. I'm in Minneapolis, so I understand, how many Johnsons there are, and Tom Johnsons and Tom Nelsons and Ron Johnsons and Tom Johnsons. That's a particular a kind of Wisconsin thing. Where do you fit when people... So you don't have a standout name, right? A Russ Feingold that has a ring, in Wisconsin. Where do you fit in the ecosystem of politics in Wisconsin? Like, how will people refer to you when they say, "Oh, Tom Nelson's running. He's the what guy?" He's the, like some people say, she's the CEO woman, or he's the straight talking candidate. How do you think they're going to describe
Bernie Sanders Republican?
Yeah,
that was me.
He is the honest person. He's the honest candidate. We're at the point right now where that's all you have to say. He's the honest candidate. I mean, I would think, if I were to put myself in a category, I would consider myself to be a progressive populist. I've always considered myself a populist in the sense I take my politics to the people. And so when I first ran for office back in 2004, I knocked on 22,000 doors, just like my dad knocked on 12, 14, 15,000 doors when he started his church. I mean, it's a tried and true way to do that. The policies that I've championed, fighting the payday lending industry, fighting hard to keep the senior care, which was a prescription drug program of choice for our seniors, or pushing through a pretty tough budget in 2009, 2010 during the Great Recession, when I was majority leader down in the legislature. And then the other examples too, recently, organizing with the local steel workers from the Appleton Coated Mill, and to take on a grassroots fight, to organize a fight that we would ultimately prevail on a judge to give both workers and local management another shot to run that mill. And that was, we worked through different things within the system, specifically taking advantage of a little known provision in Wisconsin receivership law, turning on its head. I mean, this is a classic David and Goliath story. I think that's one of the reasons why my book is doing well. I mean, I'm very surprised 3 weeks into the release or after the release, it's still in the top 10 for new releases in labor policy on Amazon.com. So think about that. My book is doing really well in the category of labor policy on Amazon.com. So just think if Amazon wasn't so anti-labor right now, I think my book would probably be doing a little bit better. But we're doing that,
and
we're
probably
doing well.
number
We
one
can
in
get the word
paper
out.
mill, probably number one in the paper mill category.
Yes.
And then people are going to order it on Kindle. I mean, the ironies will just keep
They are.
rolling out on all this. Hey,
There's actually
a
discount. There's actually a discount on Kindle too. Paperback's $19.99. Kindle's like $6.99. I'm like, guys, it's a whole thing. We don't want to put the paper industry out of business.
Right? Where's that? Who's paying for the Kindle? Hey, when people are going to engage in this around the country, they're going to hear, let's get a Democrat to knock off the Republican in the Senate seat, right? And that's going to put a lot of money, a lot of energy. People like us from around the country are going to be thinking about this race. And if you're the candidate, they're going to be thinking a lot about you in that. But in Wisconsin, it's a different narrative. And this is always the case for these high profile races, right? Wisconsin voters, for whatever reason, picked a Republican in Ron Johnson and a Democrat in Tammy Baldwin. And how do you think the Wisconsin voter psyche is going to be thinking about having two Democrats be their representatives?
Well, I think bottom line, someone asked me about the typical Wisconsin voter, and I explained that the Wisconsin voter is a lot like the New Hampshire primary voter. They take their votes very, very serious, and they expect attention from the candidates to spend time making their case, whether it's a candidate for the state assembly, county executive, president, or of course, U.S. Senate. Now, as far as having two Democrats, we had two Democrats from 1992 to 2010 when you had Herb Kohl and Russ Feingold. And then before that, you had Gaylord Nelson and Bill Proxmire from 1960 to 1980. So this would not be unusual. And I think the reason why is those candidates, those Democratic candidates, recognize that, and that they can't just be a hardcore Democrat right down the line, but they need to respond to people and what they're looking for. And there are some issues that Democrats have not done a good job of articulating. So, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, right now there's pretty much one brand of Republican, but Democrats who can articulate issues and concerns and earn the support of voters and then keep the support of voters. And people are asking, well, how can someone who has supported Medicare for all, who supports Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and other issues that Bernie Sanders champions, and was a Bernie Sanders delegate last year, but has been elected and reelected 6 times in Joe McCarthy's home county. How does that work? And I think it comes down to being honest about the values and the things that are important to you. And it just so happens that those things that are important to me fall on, the progressive end of the spectrum. But, bottom line, when you're going into a primary and you're going to have opponents, of course, and you are going to be the progressive candidate. Well, how can you win? Well, if you look at Bernie Sanders in 2016, he won every single county except for one, 71 of the 72 counties. So I think that I'm going to make a very strong, a very compelling case of why I would be a good U.S. senator and do well representing the good people of the state.
Yeah, great. Tom, I want to talk about Ron Johnson, but someone in the chat, Tiffany in the chat, is asking about the title of your book. So we don't want to miss the opportunity to make a sale. So what's the name
Thanks
of
for the
your
help.
book?
So it's called One Day Stronger: How One Union Local Saved a Mill and Change the Industry and What It Means for Manufacturing. It's almost as long as the first chapter.
Nice. Excellent. One Day
And you can
Stronger
buy the
by
book
Tom
at
Nelson.
onedaystrongerbook.com, onedaystrongerbook.com. Thanks for allowing
Nice.
me to give the plug in. So
Yeah,
I
that's
think
awesome.
the reason,
So
yeah. And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
and so
So
one of the
I,
reasons, sure, no,
well,
but,
let me
but
just kind of
asking
tee
like
things
why
up a
that
little bit.
title. Sure.
Oh, well, I want to talk about Ron Johnson here for a couple of minutes, if we can. So, I think if we were to make a list of, most, I don't know what the right adjective is, reprehensible. Uh, maybe if we take, pull the venom out a little bit, maybe concerning senators. There's folks that would kind of be on the list. My senator Tom Cotton would probably be on that list. Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, but it seems lately like your Republican opponent Ron Johnson has been trying to take the inside lane to get to the top of that list. And so maybe if folks don't realize who Ron Johnson is, he's the one who said that he felt safe during the January 6th insurrection, and if it had been Black Lives Matter protesters instead, he wouldn't have felt safe. He's the one who has referred to the insurrectionists on January 6th as good people and patriots, and kind of dismissed their actions as no big deal. He's the one who just this week was pushing hydrochloroquine as a treatment for the coronavirus.
Still doing it.
Still doing it. He's consistent. That's his primary argument.
He is consistent in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is someone who has over the last several weeks has kind of very quickly risen to national prominence for all of the wrong reasons. So, what is it, certainly before Ron Johnson kind of got into all of our consciousness as, one of these, kind of reprehensible senators, he was already in your consciousness as someone that needed to be replaced. Why is it that Ron Johnson is not a good representative in the U.S. Senate for the people of Wisconsin?
How much time do you have?
Got all day.
I mean, let's take it from the top. I mean, I could go on with a laundry list of issues. I mean, here's someone that has had a pretty good life. He's a billionaire son-in-law who's basically handed a business, did very well for himself, gets elected to the U.S. Senate, and instead of paying it forward and making sure all Americans have a similar opportunity or just simply have a shot at the American dream, he's done everything he can to undercut that. You look at the tax policies that he's passed, how he has been lockstep with Donald Trump, and he's literally benefited in the tens of thousands of dollars on the tax cuts that he has supported. What I want to do is I wanted to make sure that this economy works for everyone and not just the very wealthy like Ron Johnson, who's completely out of touch. But the people on the block that I grew up with, working families on Carolyn Drive in Little Chute. So then you just have this basically fundamental different outlook on the economy, and the same thing for government too. I mean, we need to make sure that the government is working for working families and not just the well-to-do like Ron Johnson and the ultra-left. So I think that by itself is a very, very strong reason to run for office and a really good example, a huge example of how he's out of touch with Wisconsinites. But then you go into these, look it up in the dictionary, what he was talking about, Black Lives Matter versus the insurrectionists. Those are racist comments. I mean, call it what it is. He abused his position as a Homeland Security chair to gin up the kind of conspiracy theories, the unfounded accusations about the results of the election that led to the insurrection on January 6th. He was pushing quack medicine that was supposedly going to cure COVID. and he didn't take it seriously. I mean, he said a couple of times that this is, basically this is not something that we should be concerned about. When he tested positive for COVID, he had a test. He tested this, and I mentioned this in my first ad. He gets tested for COVID and then goes to a fundraiser, puts people at risk, and then finds out they tested positive. I just don't get this guy. And I mean, you could go on and on and on. I mean, it really hasn't been since Joe McCarthy that Wisconsin has had a senator like this. In fact, I think there's a pretty strong argument that is worse than Joe McCarthy. And I think of all people, I think are in a pretty good position to make that comparison, because Joe McCarthy is from Outagamie County, and his office, his court chambers were directly below where I work, where my office is.
So yeah, I'm with you, Tom, 100%. I mean, I want to thank you for running, because I live in Minneapolis, and I was thinking about having to move to Wisconsin if I didn't think somebody who could take the lane you're taking would run against Ron Johnson. So, thanks. Politics can be rough and tumble. It needs to be. And Ron Johnson's the kind that I think there needs to be not a mean, but a very assertive and truth-telling campaign run against him. So are you going to bring up the fact that he was born in Mankato, Minnesota, went to Edina High School in Minnesota, graduated from the University of Minnesota, and is a carpetbagger moving into Wisconsin? If people don't know the contrast between Minnesota and Wisconsin, which are
border states, is Doug, to be honest with you, because I'd be hypocritical. Because I was born in St. Paul. 3 months later, my dad took his first call at Sabulon Lutheran Church in Pepin and Pierce County. And then I went to school. I went to Carleton, of course, which is right down the road in Northfield, halfway between the cities and Mankato. And my dad now lives in St. Paul, and with my little sister, who will be starting college next year. I think she's going to either La Crosse or Eau Claire, but she hasn't decided yet.
Well, look, hypocrisy should not stop you from a vicious attack on the origins of this guy. I mean, don't let that hold you back. But on a larger scale, it really does need to be a contrast election. And what strikes me is why people in Wisconsin in 2011, in 2016. For Trump and for elected Ron Johnson, and it got nail-bitingly close for a short period of time in the 2020 election. So something has happened in the population of the Midwest, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota. There was this surge of Republicans over time at the governor level, in the House legislatures, and then it spilled over into the federal representatives. So that's a thing, right? The 2020s are coming out of the 2010s movement. And so we're not in the 1950s or in the 1960s when the conditions were different. There's a group of voters in Wisconsin that need to be addressed, need to be acquainted with voting for Democrats, because for some of them, it's been a decade or more that they haven't really seen their identity fitting into the Democratic lane. And we do a lot of work with religious voters who often feel outside of the Democratic care bubble. They think Democrats don't like them. Sometimes they're right about that. I'm not saying you need to bend your campaign to the most hardcore Ron Johnson Trump supporters. But there are people who 20 years ago would have been voting for you, and now Democrats don't even go to those doors anymore. They've been written off by the Democratic system. Are you the kind of candidate that's going to say, I'm not just going to work off the voter file. I'm not just going to work off of the likely voters for me. I'm going to go win over voters who didn't think they could vote for a Democrat again, and I'm going to be their ticket. So in other words, are you, to borrow a phrase from your father's world and from Robb and my world, are you going to be an evangelist to Republican voting people to get them to vote for a Democrat? Or do you feel like your better energy is spent in connecting with those who already want to vote for Democrats, and you're going to drive the turnout of those people up?
Well, I'm going to do that because that's what I've done. I mean, I would not have been able to get elected in a red county and red district if I did not figure out ways to appeal to everyone or as many people as possible. And I did that by having, a people focused campaign where I took my campaign to the people, to the doors, door knocking. I've done the same thing here with social media. And I cannot wait for the COVID to clear to get out there. I'm going to run a 72 county campaign. I understand that the Democrats have failed miserably in the last 10 years connecting with rural voters, urban voters, folks all along these faith spectrum. And I think one of the reasons why Democrats have done, who have not succeeded, is we have failed to communicate. We failed to articulate what our agenda is, what we have done, or what we like to do. Because if you break it down, our concerns are the concerns that I think are shared equally in an urban setting or a rural setting. I mean, consider the issue of income inequality. If there's income inequality in Milwaukee, there's income inequality in Rusk County. If there are issues with clean drinking water in Racine, lead poisoning, there's going to be issues with runoff from large-scale farms in Kewaunee County. If there is difficulty accessing healthcare in a urban community, then there is the lack of access to doctors and healthcare in a rural setting. So you can see right there, when you break it down, those are three bread and butter Democratic issues. And we don't need to have an issue that's focused. They always talk about, like, what's your path or targeting messages and so forth. That never works. That never works. You need to come up with a message that resonates with everyone. That is the mark of a good campaign, a really good campaign. So that's what I plan to do. It's worked for me in the past, and hopefully it works again.
That's awesome.
I have one more question along that line, sort of in this philosophical lane, if you have a minute for it. Oftentimes on the national level, I watch people who are senators or Congress people want to run for president. And when they're asked why they want to run for president, they basically describe the power that they already have as a senator. It drives me crazy, not understanding the difference between the executive branch and the legislative branch. It seems like in their explanations, right? They start describing the policies they want to put forward. And that's not always the role of the president. It's a different role. Senator is a different role than county executive. There's something that we say to these 100 senators to sort of function in our political system. I'm being dreamy here about what politics are about, but that senators are this deliberative branch, that they represent the entire state, that they're meant to negotiate, that they're supposed to have the longest term of any elected official at the federal level, 6 years. So you have time to breathe and time to work out the long-term decisions. It's not the same thing that you do as a congressperson. It's certainly not what you do as a mayor or even as a county executive. What is it about being a senator that hey, Tom Nelson knows how to be a senator. And when I'm a senator, I'm going to bring a particular skill set, gift, personality to that role that will inspire people in the political world as a senator particularly?
I think it's a very good question. I mean, I'll be the only candidate that's had both executive experience and legislative experience, being county executive here in Outagamie County and as a member of the assembly. So it's, I mean, having that kind of perspective, you can pass 8th grade civics class and understand the difference between the executive branch and the legislative branch. But I think in order to be a good U.S. Senator, you need to have the best type of experience, viewpoints, experience that you can bring to the table as a public official. And so I have had experience as both an executive and as a legislator. And I think what's helpful, particularly being an executive, is which kinds of policies, which kind of laws have worked and which ones have not, because here we are at the ground level where the rubber meets the road. And, I think it's, to have a particular philosophy, to have an ideology, to have a set of issues that you're passionate about and push changes in the law, constructive social and economic change, but then to know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think those two experiences, those two kinds of skill sets, I think, in my humble opinion, will make a good U.S. Senator.
Yeah.
Great.
Good answer. Good answer. Like that.
Thank you.
Tom, if folks are watching or listening on the podcast and they want to get connected with you, whether they're in Wisconsin or not, how can they do that?
Well, they can go to our website at nelson4forwi.com, which is the same for both Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, Nelson4WI. And if you're interested in my book, One Day Stronger, How One Union Local Saved a Mill, Changing Industry, and What It Means for American Manufacturing, that's at onedaystrongerbook.com, onedaystrongerbook.com.
Awesome.
Hey, Tom, you're in a primary to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. When is that vote? Like, when do people in Wisconsin decide who's going to represent them? And is it a binding primary process in Wisconsin, or will there be some people who don't participate in the primary and still try to become the candidate for the Democratic Party in Wisconsin?
So it is almost a little bit more than 16 months away. It's going to be in August of 2022.
Wow.
So the results of that election will determine who's going to go on to the general election. So yes, 16 months. I have plenty of time to evangelize and do my 72 county campaign.
Is it a closed primary where only Democrats can vote for who the Democratic nominee is going to be, or can people who aren't registered as Democrats vote for who the nominee is?
Yes. Right. And that's a very good question. You can pick up either a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot, so to speak. You can't do, I'm going to vote for a Democrat for the gubernatorial primary and then the Republican, or, back and forth between offices. You vote as one party, which I think was, you go back, way back, it was a progressive reform many, many years ago. So if you are aligned with the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, or simply an independent, you can pick up a Democratic ballot and vote for me. Hopefully vote for me.
I hope people do. Yeah, I hope people do. All right, Tom, thanks so much. Rob, anything else? Are you all done?
No, Tom, thank you so much. So great to chat with you, and best of luck over the next 16 months.
Great. Thanks. And good to be on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tom. Nelson4wi.com.org.
Now, maybe folks are thinking 16
Nelson
months.
for
Why
women.
are we talking to candidates, right? Like that. Come on. And listen, I'm with you. I think our political calendar, the political window, is entirely too long. I think, I kind of always like it when they dissolve parliament in England and 6 weeks later have an election. I think there's something to that.
It's because you're not a true American and you just want to go back to pre-Revolutionary War.
That's right.
So let's just move on.
That's right. Well, I'm not defending the monarchy or the Russian president as many Republicans do these days. But
how about that? Yeah.
So folks might be thinking 16 months. Why are they talking this? Listen, running a campaign takes in our current system takes so much runway, and to be able to get it going and get it off the ground. And we are all at Vote Common Good. We're already working with candidates around the country, having conversations, doing trainings, trying to provide support to candidates, because 2022 is right around the corner. And it is, we are, whether we like it or not, whether we wish the system was different or not, we've got to recognize this is the system we're in. And frankly, Trump's MAGA pack is working right now too. And we've got to be engaged and be at work with these things, and having conversations with Tom today is a part of that.
Amen to that. Because look, incumbents have an enormous advantage. If you wait to have campaigns start 6 months before, that incumbent is just in the news. They're serving their constituency. And so they get 6 years to build relationships. And then you, as a candidate, would have 6 months to try to, there's something about our system that we have to just recognize how much benefit there goes to the incumbents. So if someone like Tom wants to capture the attention, Tom Nelson, for we, WI, wants to capture the attention of those who would vote for him as Democrats and those who would vote for him as independents or Republicans. He's got to have time to get around that state. I mean, there's not as many people as there are in some other states. And that's the problem. Sometimes people think, hey, it's a small state, 5 million people in Wisconsin. That's not like living in California or Texas or Florida or New York. That's a bigger problem because those people are spread all over that state. And you got to drive to all those places and you have to figure out a pattern by which you can be communicating to mass numbers of people. So if you don't want to just focus in the urban environments, you have to start these campaigns early on. Now, he has a bit of an advantage in one county because he's well known and is an elected official there. But boy, campaigning is hard work to capture the attention. So that's why we're going to help these candidates as much as we can. Right. We hope it's Tom. And if it's somebody other than Tom, we'll help that person. By golly, if Robb Ryerson has to move to Wisconsin and act like he's, a carpetbagger like Ron Johnson, feel free. We need a Senate win.
We didn't ask Tom about his Democratic opponents, but one of his Democratic opponents I think there's 3 people who've announced to be in the race so far. One of them is the son of the owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. So it's going to be an interesting race in Wisconsin to see who is the Democratic nominee.
Son of a Bucks owner. Look, there's people and there's other people who will be thinking about this and feel like they have name recognition and can get in a little later. So someone like Tom has to get in earlier. This is what makes it complicated. We hope people see this, hear this. When I'm talking about elected officials as if it's an honorable role in our civic life. So that more people run. There's a great website. We should have these people on. Let's do this, Rob. Let's see if we can have the people on one of these weeks who run the Everybody Runs website or whatever that's called. Because this idea that think of yourself not just as a voter, but as a potential candidate is a really great way to sort of enliven your political civic engagement. It seems like everybody should just have to think about it. I started a website back in 2017, just after Trump, which I think was called Everyone Run for President. And I wanted to just recruit, 100 million people that said any one of us would be better than Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. Just everybody should run, right? As opposed to the elites and the specials and the son of millionaires or people that have fan bases already. It would be great if we saw our civic engagement as something open ever. And then people can say, no, thank you, I don't want to, but it was an option for you. Yeah. It's like the dessert menu at a restaurant. No, thank you. But thanks for bringing the tray by because I just like looking at the fudge brownie on there. It would be nice for people to think about politics as something they have an option to participate in, even if they choose not. And most people, they don't even think about voting, let alone running. So it's really something when somebody's willing to run, and over coming months, you're going to hear a lot of that from Vote Common Good, people who've said, yeah, pick me. I want to be in the game. So, and Robb Ryerson was one of those people. So glad we picked you, Rob. All right, anything more?
No. Great conversation.
We've managed to let this go well over an hour, like 4 or 5 minutes over an hour. A little extra treat for Tuesday. All right. Hey, we'll talk to y'all tomorrow because tomorrow is Faith Day. So we'll be on with 3 faith leaders. And then Thursday, we have a very special guest. I just can't remember who it is right now. And then on Friday, we're going to be talking about what it is that makes us human on our science podcast, what like consciousness and what makes a human being have the things that we declare a human being to be. So if you're into that, you're going to love it. It's going to be a fabulous conversation. That's Science on Friday. On Mondays, we talk about news. Of course, it's Tuesday. So lots of things going on, and Vote Common Good, it wants to stay up with you in all the ways. So get on our email list if you would. And I'll say the thing people say, like this wherever you're watching it. Share it with a friend if you're somebody watching it on Facebook right now. And if you're still listening right now, you are a hardcore follower of this. If you haven't shut off your podcast, if you haven't shut off this live stream and you're still listening, yeah, we're talking to you, Dave and Mark and Tiffany. We're talking to all of you that are even willing to comment here. Share this with a friend or two, and we'd love to see them become part of the common good movement in politics, faith, issues, science, economics, and a little common good news for all of us. So thanks for being around.
Absolutely.